Welcome back to Stone to Moon. There is a specific number etched into the mind of every student of Philippine history, and that number is 333. It represents the years Spain supposedly held absolute dominion over the archipelago, from 1565 to 1898. It paints a picture of total submission, suggesting that for over 3 centuries, the entire population lived under the shadow of the church and the crown. But this narrative is incomplete, and in many places, it is simply false. If we look closely at the colonial maps, really look at them, we do not see a solid block of territory. We see a fractured landscape where vast regions remained independent, defiant, and unconquered. The reality of the Spanish era was far more chaotic than the history books admit. The colonial government in Manila claimed authority over the entire map, yet in their private correspondence to the King of Spain, Governor, generals confessed the embarrassing truth. There were massive territories, entire mountain ranges, and sea lanes where Spanish law did not exist. They had specific terms for these areas. They called the people remontados, those who fled to the mountains, and, infieles, the unfaithful. These were not merely scattered bandits. These were organized societies that looked at a global empire and refused to kneel. Our journey into this hidden history begins in the north, in the formidable Cordillera mountain range. When the Spanish conquistadors first arrived on Luzon, their primary motivation was not religion, but gold. They had heard tales of the Igorot mines, veins of wealth that ran deep into the earth. They marched into the highlands with the confidence of a military superpower, but they were met by a fortress engineered by nature. The vertical slopes, the suffocating jungle, and the thinning air turned their heavy European armor and weaponry into a liability rather than an advantage. The Igorot resistance was a masterclass in tactical warfare. They understood that they could not defeat the Spanish in open fields, so they weaponized the terrain. When Captain Juan de Salcedo led an expedition in 1572, he found himself fighting an enemy he could barely see. The Highlanders would lure Spanish columns into narrow, choking valleys, and then unleash avalanches of boulders and timber from the cliffs above. They struck with precision and vanished into the mist before the Spanish muskets could be reloaded. Expedition after expedition was sent to seize the gold mines, and for 300 years, they returned with nothing but casualties. This resistance was not just military, it was economic. While the lowland population was forced into the polo y servicio, a system of forced labor, and made to pay the tributo, the people of the Cordillera remained free from taxation. They continued to mine their gold and trade it on their own terms, often smuggling it down to the lowlands to trade for salt and iron, bypassing the Spanish monopoly entirely. They proved that a determined people could maintain their sovereignty, even with an imperial power sitting on their doorstep. Shift your gaze to the south, to the waters of Mindanao and Sulu, where the resistance took the form of a clash of civilizations. The Sultanates of Mindanao and Sulu were not tribal bands. They were sophisticated maritime states with established legal codes, standing armies, and diplomatic recognition from foreign powers. The Spanish referred to them as Moros, and they engaged in a brutal conflict known as the Moro Wars, a struggle that lasted for nearly the entire duration of the Spanish presence. The Spanish Navy relied on the galleon, a massive ship designed for trans-oceanic voyages, heavy with firepower, but clumsy in the treacherous currents of the archipelago. The Sultanates countered with the Caracoa, a warship engineered for speed and agility. These vessels could navigate shallow reefs where Spanish ships would run aground, and they could be rowed at high speeds against the wind. The Moro navies used this technological advantage to launch raids that struck terror into the heart of the colony, burning shipyards and settlements as far north as Manila Bay, proving that the Spanish capital itself was never truly safe. The myth of total conquest is definitively shattered by the diplomatic history of the South. In 1878, the Sultan of Sulu signed a treaty with the British North Borneo Company, leasing a portion of his territory. In international law, one cannot lease land that one does not own. By entering into a formal agreement with the British Empire, the Sultan demonstrated that his sovereignty was recognized by the world powers, regardless of what the maps in Madrid claimed. Spain could build forts along the coast, but the land, the people, and the law remained under the Sultan. Between the warriors of the north and the navies of the south lay the silent frontiers of resistance. In the dense interiors of islands like Mindoro and Palawan, and in the deep forests of the Visayas, a different kind of defiance took root. This was the resistance of avoidance. The remontados were Filipinos who simply refused the colonial bargain. When the taxes became too high, or the forced labor too harsh, they burned their homes and retreated into the wilderness. The Spanish administration was terrified of this movement. They built reducciones, concentrated settlements under the sound of the church bells, specifically to keep people from wandering off. But they could not police the jungle. In the highlands of Mindoro, the Mangyan tribes maintained their animist traditions and their own writing systems, completely untouched by 3 centuries of Catholic conversion efforts happening just a few miles away on the coast. These zones became sanctuaries of freedom, proving that the colonial state was a hollow shell, strong on the perimeter but empty in the center. So why do we cling to the number 333? We do it because it is simpler to teach a history of total defeat than to explain the complex reality of partial occupation. It is easier to paint the pre-revolutionary Filipino as a victim than as a survivor. But the truth is that the Spanish Empire, for all its global reach, lacked the manpower, the resources, and the tactical intelligence to subdue a population protected by such difficult geography and fierce determination. When we look back at this era, we must redefine our understanding of the map. We must see the Philippines not as a conquered colony, but as a battleground where the conquest was never completed. The legacy of the Igorot, the Moro, and the Remontado is not a footnote in history. It is the main story. It is the story of a people who held the line for 10 generations, ensuring that there were parts of these islands where the foreign flag never flew. If this deep dive into the unconquered Philippines has changed your perspective, support the channel. Hit the like button to help this truth reach more people, and subscribe to Stone to Moon for more history that the textbooks left out. The past is not just what was written, it is what was survived.